I just came from Wreck-It Ralph when he broke the internet, so I figured I would do a quick review. And you all know what that means. I should make a new Kirblog because that is all that I can give you. Not my best, but I'm recording this after midnight on Sunday. I'm not having time to do any streaming today on Monday when this is going up, so I figured I'd put this up as the other video for the week in the meantime. Plus, figured this would be, timely considering the movie just came out and yada yada. But yeah, it's funny. In celebrating 5 years worth of doing these, I realized, I haven't been doing Kirblogs as long as since the first one came out. A little quick story about that before I get into the actual review. I actually went to go see Wreck-It Ralph 1 on I believe the opening night that it premiered when I was at Youmacon in 2011. And I believe maybe it was either 2011 or 2012, but it was one of the years that I went to Youmacon. And for those of you who have not been to that in Detroit, Michigan, there's a movie theater that was built into the convention center. So I was able to go see the movie with a whole bunch of some of my closest friends at the time, and that was a real good time. And it's funny because I guess just to go over some brief thoughts, I remember when I first heard about, Disney's making a video game world movie back when it was going to be called Joe Jump or whatever the early beta name was or whatever. Admittedly, I was really pessimistic and not super looking forward to it. And then I was massively surprised at how quickly I got into it. Once they had the first few reveal trailers and everything, I was really excited about the movie and, got super interested in it. Fell in love with it, and I still, just this past weekend before I went to go see Wreck-It Ralph 2, I rewatched the first one again, and I've watched it probably like 5 or 6 times in my time, and still affects me, still makes me cry, still really gets me, and interestingly, having seen it again, I think for the first time in at least a year or two as of late. There were some things about watching the first one now that I look back, I'm like, there were a couple things about this that I think maybe weren't done as well as I remember them being, and probably its biggest flaw for me was that it gets a little cliche at times. It can be a little ham-fisted with some of its stuff. Somebody I went to go see it with was pointing out today that I have to remember that it's Disney first. It's a Disney movie and actually not a Pixar movie, as people may confuse it to be. But so it's a little more corny in some of its dialogue and everything. But yeah, I still love it. Still made me tear up at all the times that it usually makes me tear up. So it certainly says something to it. Yeah, so I was interested in how this was going to go. Conceptually, I remember at first I was slightly disappointed, but still understanding. It's one of those things, much like with, we're lucky we're getting a 4th Toy Story movie where we get to explore more of these things about, what it's like in this universe where toys are sort of alive. Once they introduced a world where, I guess not just video game characters, but data, has life to it, and has a day-to-day and everything. That's extremely interesting. And, there's so many things that you could do, with just video games alone. And so there were a lot of things that I wish I could have seen them do with even just more, video game things, and not even specifically anything to do with the other pre-existing characters or whatever. I was a little confused why people were so dead set on thinking that Sonic and all the other licensed characters were going to be big parts of the movie when they clearly were never intended to be. I don't know where people got that impression from, other than just obviously the marketing material, but not this is the story, as it has to do with these whatever. Nonetheless. What I mean by that is it would have been interesting to see them explore other things within, how this universe works when it comes to other video game stuff. But I do also understand why they decided to go with the internet as kind of the motif of, how this story was evolving and, where they were going next with it. It literally opens up with the plug being put in, it fits in very nicely with this whole world and everything. And the aesthetic and all that. So, so we're, I'm going to get into the spoiler stuff now, but just to open things up with, really enjoyed it. In fact, actually, my kind of general thought is that I think that actually the message of this film was conveyed a little bit more strongly than even the original one. The interesting thing about Wreck-It Ralph 1 is that it's a story of, the essence of the story is about being tired of your day to day and wanting something more and wanting to be appreciated and you know, and you know, particularly wanting to be appreciated, I think was kind of the takeaway from it. But oddly enough, in kind of my you know, fifth or sixth time of rewatching it, however many times it's been at this point, I realized that there was something a little flawed inherently about the whole message of the first one, which is where, like, you know, hey, I'm treated like crap by people, and you know, that bred me to want something more in life and want change. And ultimately, you know, I mean, he literally says it's like, you know, even though I'm taking it one day at a time and I still have to do the same thing every day and et cetera, and I'm still able to be appreciated by people now, and I have this one person who really appreciates me. It's a little, in retrospect, I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's a little all over the place in terms of like, you know, it's like, oh, why shouldn't he want more? You know, not only because he's treated like crap, but because it's like, yeah, it's as the sequel, you know, entails, people get, you know, don't like complacency necessarily, or maybe not complacency, but they, you know, they get tired of the same thing day in and day out, and you know, want something more. It's funny, Vanellope's description, actually, this was something. This movie's so incredibly relatable in both a lot of what happens with Vanellope and Ralph. Specifically what Vanellope once said about, because I relate to this very much, certainly, with that feeling of like, you know, the unpredictable excitement of life when, like, you know, things aren't always the same every single day. You know, you want something new and you know, challenging and fun and exciting in that way, you know, to greet you with each day. And, you know, that's a feeling that I am very thankful that I get to experience because of, you know, the circumstance of where I'm in and what I get to do with my life. Like that's what I get, and I always think about that. I think I've once compared it, I probably said this in another Kirblog before, but I've once compared it to like the excitement you get from like waking up on a Saturday morning and getting to watch, like, you know, a new episode of your favorite cartoons, which I know maybe that, you know, feeling is a little bit different now because Saturday morning cartoons are semi not a thing as much as they used to be anymore, but nonetheless, but it's just that same kind of thing. It's like, oh, the new episode of this thing or whatever, all my shows, and like that kind of thing, like that. That's a very small scale version of that, but like it's that kind of feeling that I relate to, and you know, that's what I feel I get to live with, to live now, which is great, and I feel that like Vanellope seeking that, and you know, slaughter race, and you know, the whole world of the internet, and you know, her wanting that and everything. You know, makes complete sense. On a further, and maybe this is more on the sad side of things, but the, you know, Ralph is so interestingly the bad guy of this movie in a way, even though he's also basically still the main character. It's this weird duality of him being both the you know, the protagonist and the antagonist. I think fittingly so, you know, or at least, maybe not fittingly, but you know, expectedly so. A lot of people were thinking, oh, you know, is the algorithm girl? Yes, is she going to be the twist villain, or is Elms Moore going to be the twist villain? I think I made some joke about, oh, it's Alan Tudyk. He'll turn out to be Turbo and King Candy or something. You know, or like one of the slaughter race characters, but no. Thankfully, like this is actually kind of a positive, other than the comment section scene, which was interesting to see, and also pretty relatable for all people in the world now. I think with the way that the digital age is. Other than that, it was kind of a very positive display of how the internet can be, because everyone, even the spam guy, everybody seemed to be a very positive, loving and understanding and caring figure, which I think was nice. I think it was good to sort of like, you know, convey a sense of positivity, even if it's not necessarily, you know, accurate. But then again, when has Disney ever been accurate with their fairy tale? So, but no, it was interesting, and you know, in that there was really no villain, and Ralph's selfishness and his issue was literally the problem. I guess in definition, it was a man versus self kind of story, even though it was also about, you know, his connection with this other person. But you know, as far as relatability goes, in addition to the thing about Vanellope, I mean, you know, Ralph's whole thing about, like, you know, not him even realizing this until the end, but and the whole, like, I have to let her go, and you know, I know she's still going to be part of my life. I have to embrace this change and, you know, accept it for what it is and live with it. But also just the identity of, like, I'm this person's best friend who, you know, or close friend, and in some cases of like, oh, and I'm the one who screws everything up, even though I'm trying to do the right thing, and I'm trying to help them, and, you know, I genuinely believe in my heart that I am helping them. It's like that was almost, I don't want to say painful to watch, but it's like, oof, that hits me home in a way that's like, yeah, I like this, and also, ow, I'm watching the man, as he says, the man in the mirror. But yeah, getting back on focus, and on that note, I loved the focus of this movie. It, like, the whole arc of everything, and, you know, it's kind of fittingly in description, it's like a Disneyland tour of all these different locales. Like, it doesn't really stick around one place for too long. But every scene, like every single thing that happens in this movie is like important to, you know, the progression of this arc with both Ralph and Vanellope, and the focus that is on purely the two of them. And, you know, the other side characters don't really overstay their welcome. They all kind of just help in you know, the progression of this, like, you know, Vanellope and Ralph trying to figure out their crap and, you know, get over their issues and, you know, ultimately arrive to where they need to be, to where they're both going to be in a healthier friendship. You know, and the payoff, I felt, you know, logically worked really well. It was very satisfying. And, you know, the journey to get there was just a lot of fun. You know, I mean, like, much like my, and, you know, I get this, like, much like my pessimism I had at, oh boy, Disney's going to do a video game movie, we'll see how this turns out. A lot of people, I think, were reasonably concerned about, like, oh boy, they're going to do an internet movie, let's see how this turns out. But, you know, I mean, well, for one thing, creatively, the design of, like, the internet world was really cool. Actually, and, you know, I'm not taking credit for this, but, like, I feel like this is a massively beyond imagination perfection of what I perceived like the very, very, very first idea for how I wanted Tome to be. And that originally was like, you know, for those of you who don't know this, like the really first incarnation I had that like never even got made into a thing. It was like planned to be a comic or whatever. A little trivia for you. I imagined it being like an internet world and not specifically like an online game. You know, and then of course in this case, like the internet world was kind of like, you know, they had the game stuff integrated with it. I would say it's just as like interesting of kind of what Summer Wars did with, like, I forget what they called the virtual internet world of that movie, but that kind of, you know, fixation of how, like, oh, this is what, you know, the cyberverse looks like for these people in this, you know, in this universe. And you know, the gags were all really funny. You know, funnily enough, there was also one, you know, again, into spoilers here, but I was kind of happy to see it go, just because it wasn't really funny, and it was kind of just whatever. But the whole scene from these trailers with, like, you know, shouldn't it be Ralph wrecks the internet? Yeah, you know, I am Wreck-It Ralph, and you're not wrong, that whole thing. I was just like, yeah, let's explain the joke in this really weird, awkward kind of way. And I was like, okay, and I was waiting for it to happen. But of course, also I was noticing, and I mean, I'm just used to this being a thing with Western animated movies now, but where they'll animate something specifically for a trailer, or they might change something later for the final movie or whatever. Like, I remember that, take me to a website that's super intense and really weird and blah, 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 and then that turned out to just be the thing with the, you know, probably in an effort to avoid spoiling the thing about the whole premise in the movie with getting this part back for the game. But yeah, it was interesting not seeing that in there, but I didn't miss it too hard. And even the stuff that I'd seen repeatedly, like the princess scene, you know, it was still great to see it in total. And yeah, even that little bit, yeah, the one of the scenes that Merida, like, which became a whole meme in and of itself, like part of that whole line that she had wasn't even in there ultimately. And I was like, oh, interesting. But yeah, no, all the jokes hit. You know, everything was, you know, rolling at a really, really good pace. You know, there's a lot of really interesting subtleties. But the animation on this one, I think, was even better. On the first movie, looks excellent, of course, and there are a lot of good little subtleties that they have with, like, the 8-bit characters and how they move and everything. But, like, some stuff about, like, the facial expressions, like the fidelity and, like, all the characters. Like, like Gal Gadot's character, the hot chick, her. I feel like there's all these, like, really, like, beautifully animated subtleties that they had with her model in particular. You know, and Ralph and Vanellope, like all the pre-existing characters, they seemed like just a touch more expressive than they were previously. So everything about this one, in essence, like as far as like the storytelling and the production of it and everything, it feels like a big improvement over the first one. And I love the first one very, very much. I think I actually did put it in one of my top 5 Disney movies when I did that with Mike Rocco a long time ago. But yeah, like this was even bigger and better. There was just something about this one the overall that I really liked. I think if I had to say one specific thing, I think it is that focus on getting the overall point of the story, like, you know, really, really well across and having such a satisfying arc at the end. I couldn't find too many flaws. I think this isn't really one of them, but it's funny when I think back on the way back from the movie. I was thinking about like, oh, I always wish I could see more of some of the characters and like, other things that we didn't get to see like happening at that time, and like other things that I wish were explained and all that. And I like then I think, oh, it would be cool if like there was a series of this. But I've said that about both Big Hero 6 and How to Train Your Dragon, which obviously isn't Disney, but like I think about that and I'm like, oh, and then they get a series and then I don't watch it because I realize, oh, I'm not that invested, and I'm gonna see How to Train Your Dragon 3. I'm sure I will. But so it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it would be cool to see more of what this universe is like on a grander scheme and on a more consistent basis. But both of these movies are so solid that it's like, hey, if, at the very minimum, if we get a Wreck-It Ralph 3 and they explore other ideas, then like I'm happy with that. I can't complain too hard. The only other like real flaw I could think of, like I could like legitimately is, at least to me anyway, is I wasn't super keen on the dialogue for this one. I feel like. Even compared to the first one, which was again pretty corny, some moments in this one there were like some weird, awkward little things. I mean, that's why like I was kind of okay that they cut that or didn't ultimately use that scene with "You're not wrong" and that whole thing. So that exchange is like what okay, and it's not like it's out of character for them. It works. Just there's some moments where it's like execution wise, I feel like it watered it down just a little bit, but everything. All of the important beats that lead up to, the big satisfying thing is, that goodbye scene and, the I love you so much, which that single moment of Vanellope hugging him and saying that and them saying goodbye to each other, that was the big payoff that the entire journey and everything leading up to it made completely satisfying. And the idea of, hey, both characters still kind of get what they want, and this is the compromise that they reach, and, because they both have to, kind of give up something and change, in order to, move on with their lives in a way that is productive and healthy and beneficial to both of them as friends. Like, it's a really, really good, solid message. And I know I've gone on about this with, my thoughts on a lot of different stories and things, but I think that's what I've grown to value the most, especially in film. So I'm happy to see it with this here, more than anything. And I love these characters, and I always would love to see more of them. And I know it's probably going to be a very long time, when and if we ever get another one of these, if they do a Wreck-It Ralph 3 or have any interest in doing that, I have no idea. But it was really fun to play with these characters again, and peek into their world, and see them living and doing all these fun things and all that. I feel like I'm already gonna miss them. It's one of those strange relationships. I feel like I don't have this often with animated movie characters, but like the Wreck-It Ralph cast is definitely one where I'm like, oh man, I've seen you guys, and I feel like I'm gonna miss you guys now. I want to see you again doing more. But maybe it is kind of special, like much like with what ultimately happens with Ralph and Vanellope in the end, and that they keep in touch, once in a while, and update each other on things. Maybe that's the relationship that I need to have with Wreck-It Ralph, where it's like, hey, you know what? I really value the friendship that I have with these characters and this world and these films and everything. Is that I get to see them once in a while, and I really treasure it. And it's a really good experience every time. And, who knows if this will be the last. I have no idea. But, yeah, a lot of fun. Good time. Would love to see it again. We'll probably pick up the Blu-ray. I'm now very curious to see some of the unused bits of content. Wondering if there might be an art book for this one. Might want to pick that up, too, because I have the art book for the first one. And, but that'll do it. So, just a quick one. Wanted to get my thoughts out there on the movie, and figured it's been long enough since it's been out. So, if you guys have seen the movie, and I presume you have if you're listening this far, and if not, then I'm sorry I spoiled it for you. I horned you. Yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments below on what you thought of the movie. Anything you would have liked to see, other than obviously, oh, where was Mario? Leave that part out. Just your general thoughts and opinions. What you would have liked to see in this movie, what you might like to see in the next movie, and and if you have any other suggestions for Kirblog topics and have questions for the mailbag section or any of that stuff, let me know. I have some things planned very soon for Poke-Sember. And I'm sure I'll probably be getting back to streaming in the next few days and try to finish up the rest of the Tome RPG Kickstarter characters and all the usual stuff that you're used to me, going on and on about constantly. So, yeah, that'll do it. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I can fix it. No, I can't.